My father wrote about an adventure with a flat tire in his memoirs. It goes like this. It was about 1965 when my wife Harriet and I took our daughters, who were 8 and about 5 years old, on our summer vacation to see the Teton Mountains in Wyoming. The Tetons were one of my favorite places. The fact that one went through Yellowstone Park to get there from Minnesota was just a bit of icing on the cake. It was just a few miles east of Miles City, Montana, when our accident happened. At that time, I was driving a 1963 Buick with a Power Glide transmission. It was the first upgrade car we had ever owned. It was a hot day, which meant that the concrete highway was probably 100 degrees. I was traveling at 80 miles per hour, so the tires were probably smoking. Just as we were on a bridge crossing some river or deep valley, the right front tire blew out, throwing the car onto the curb and causing the rear end of the car to fly up onto the cross girder, smashing the trunk lid open. Fortunately, we all had our seatbelts on, but at that time there were no shoulder restraints. My head hit the roof, but not too hard. I was able to hold the car on the road as we rolled to a stop some distance beyond the bridge. The rest of the family seemed to be all right. The car following us stopped, and they were from Minneapolis. They offered to take the family into Miles City while I stayed with the car, which had a curled up front bumper and badly damaged trunk lid, and a flat tire, of course. We decided Harriet should go get a motel room, try to rent a replacement car, and send a wrecker to tow me in. We didn't have cell phones in those days, so I don't know how the highway patrol learned about us, but soon after the family left, a patrol car appeared. The officer apologized for taking so long to get there, but he said he had to go home and change his shirt. The patrol cars did not have air conditioning, and he said the officers were supposed to look neat at all times while dealing with the public. A wrecker appeared a while later and hooked the car up to tow. I rode in the cab with the driver. By the time we arrived at the Buick dealer, Harriet had found a motel and rented a station wagon from the car dealership. They thought they could get our car repaired in about a week. We were uncertain about going all the way to the Tetons in the rental car, so they suggested a river close by that had campgrounds. After a week's time, we went back to reclaim our car and proceed home again, never making it to the Tetons. Sometime later, we were shopping at Dayton's department store in downtown Minneapolis when we met the folks who had rescued us on the highway in Montana. What timing! We met as we were all getting on the same escalator. 2 minutes different in either of our movements, and we wouldn't have seen each other at all. Well, getting a flat tire on a road trip becomes part of the trip and a story to tell. Being stuck is not necessarily bad. Since I was the 5-year-old in that story, I only have a vague memory of the experience. But camping trips with my family were always fun. I'm sure we made the most of it. And the kindness of strangers helped our family on its way. Being an adult driving alone with a flat tire can be frightening, though. Barbara Brown Taylor writes in her book, An Altar in the World, all you really need is a flat tire to find yourself thrust suddenly into the wilderness. This happened to me, so I know, she wrote. One moment, everything is fine. You are on your way home from Atlanta after a satisfying day in town. The stars are out. Thistle and Shamrock is on the radio. Then you hear an increasingly loud noise coming from the direction of your right front fender. while your car begins to list seriously in that same direction. By the time you wrestle the car to the shoulder of the highway, you know you have a flat tire. Depending on your personality, the panic can begin immediately, or you can hold it off for a while, opening the glove compartment to find the chapter on changing tires in the owner's manual. If you are a man, you do not look forward to this. If you are a woman alone on the road at night, your mind starts working overtime. Even if you call AAA, it might be an hour before they arrive. In the meantime, there is no telling who will pull over, either to help you or to hurt you. You know you are supposed to stay in the car with the doors locked, but since your compact car sways violently every time a semi whizzes by, this does not seem like the best idea. You are truly, seriously lost, even though you know exactly where you are. Something is happening to you in this wilderness that does not happen when you are safe at home. Even though you would rather not think about it, you are exquisitely vulnerable in this moment. You are vulnerable to this moment. Your carefully maintained safety net has ripped. You are in need of help, and your awareness of this is not a bad thing. There are people all over the world, she continues, who know how helpless you are feeling right now. Plenty of them would trade places with you in a minute to be sitting in a wilderness where there are no bombs going off, no guns being fired. If you listen to these people, they may be able to convince you that the odds of your survival are very, very good. Even if the odds were against you, there is something holy in this moment of noticing just how perishable you are. It is part of the truth about what it means to be human, however hard most of us work not to know that. I've been thinking about the deaths of dear members of our congregation in recent weeks and months. I've been thinking about the serious diagnoses of other dear members, as have you, no doubt. We're thinking of the terrorist attack in New Zealand and all the other individual personal losses that many of us grieve and bear every day as we wake up and get dressed and move about our day. All this has me thinking about how perishable we humans really are. I've been wondering lately, maybe you have too, why all these deaths? Why all these deaths and so close together? This is not the path I imagined our community would be traveling right now. Yet, the path is the path. Facing our own mortality and losing our loved ones is part of the journey. So how do we want to inhabit these perishable human bodies on life's path of beauty and loss? 16th century Spanish mystic Teresa of Avila wrote, "The whole way to heaven is heaven itself." But I wonder, how do we find those bits of heaven on a road scattered with speed bumps, flat tires, obstacles, and losses? I think it has to do something with cultivating a place of waiting and stillness inside ourselves, finding those waystations in unexpected places. where we can wait and be calm and be sheltered and know the love that pervades everything. Travel writer Pico Iyer, in his TED Talk called Where is Home, spoke about staying at a hermitage in Northern California right after his house burned down in a wildfire. He said, "I started to go back to this place over and over again, and I noticed that I was doing my most important work there invisibly, just by sitting still, and certainly coming to my most critical decisions the way I never could when I was racing from the last email to the next appointment. And I began to think that something in me had really been crying out for stillness. But of course, I couldn't hear it because I was running around so much. It's only by stopping movement that you can see where to go. And it's only by stepping out of your life and the world that you can see what you most deeply care about and find a home." And I've noticed so many people now do take conscious measures to sit quietly for 30 minutes every morning, just collecting themselves in one corner of the room without their devices. Or they go running every evening, or leave their cell phones behind when they go to have a long conversation with a friend. Movement is fantastic privilege, and it allows us to do so much that our grandparents could never have dreamed of doing. And I begin to think that really movement is only as good as the sense of stillness that you can bring to it, to put it all into perspective. Kathleen Norris also tells a story about travel informed by daily spiritual practice. She wrote in her book, Dakota, A Spiritual Geography, "The silence of the plains, this great unpeopled landscape of earth and sky, is much like the silence one finds in a monastery, an unfathomable silence that has the power to reform you. And the plains where I live now have changed me. I was a New Yorker for 6 years and still love to visit my friends in the city. But now I am conscious of carrying a plains silence with me, within me, to the cities." Several years ago, she wrote, "I traveled to New England to visit a friend who had terminal cancer. The journey took on the nature of a quest. First, the 125-mile trip over the prairie to the nearest airport in Bismarck, North Dakota, then a plane to Minneapolis, and then LaGuardia, where I waited nearly 2 hours for my baggage, then a bus into Manhattan, a taxi to Penn Station, where I stood for another 2 hours in a vast crowd, it was Labor Day weekend, waiting for a train. It seemed as if all of the city's dense, humid heat was concentrated in that room, and yet I felt at peace. The crowd was the typical urban mix, all races, young and old, rich and poor, quiet and ranting. But as I stood in this group of strangers, I was happy to be one of many, and a powerful calm came over me. I began to see each of us as a treasure bearer, carrying our souls like a great blessing through the world. I've come to see, as the monk Thomas Merton said, that it is the function of solitude to help one realize such things, and that it is the separateness of the plains, like the separateness of the monastery, that teaches me that when I am in the city, there are no strangers, and that the gate of heaven is everywhere, even at Penn Station on Labor Day weekend. Friends, you know as well as anyone that the journey of life is not always smooth. We are going to hit speed bumps, get flat tires, and not reach the destination we thought we were going to. I think that daily spiritual practice can help us with these obstacles, help create that calm and stillness within that we carry with us on all our travels. Spiritual practice helps us experience those unexpected delays as waystations of relief, of shelter, where we can wait and accept help from strangers. For the path is the path. No matter how hard we shake our fists at those obstacles in our way, the obstacles in front of us are not in the way of our lives. They are the way.